The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Eddy Arana is a professor of Spanish and German and coordinates the German program. He received a BA in Spanish, German, and Global Studies from Ripon College, an MA in German from Bowling Green State University, and an MA in Spanish at Bowling Green State University. He worked as an independent consultant in translation, interpretation, curriculum development, and intercultural competence training for 15 years and speaks 5 languages. His research includes second and third language acquisition and teaching, curriculum and instruction, the construction of identity and nation through language in German-speaking Europe, and Spanish bilingualism and heritage language maintenance. In the U.S., he has been a contributor to several publications: the teacher's editions of first-year Spanish and German textbooks, Duolingo's smartphone application for a first-year German textbook, and to the Atlantic Council's 2015 publication Through a New Prism, a next-generation strategy for the U.S. German Relationship. When not teaching, he enjoys films, traveling abroad, and international cuisine.
So I titled my presentation Including and Accessing U.S. American Citizenry Through Dual Cultural Identities and Heritage Speakers of Spanish, because the project really does weave well into the dual identities of the students who take this course. Great. So some of the goals of the course of Spanish 106 are the following. Here you have a picture of us visiting the exhibit at the Smithsonian, American Democracy, A Great Leap of Faith. So among them are to aid students to expand the vocabulary in the Spanish language. In addition, we also practice a global standard of the language, not just one particular dialect or one particular accent or one particular register, and to help them also develop their ability to make their language use intelligible. That means understandable universally. We also support students in sustaining conversations solely in Spanish. That means without switching between languages, which is very popular among U.S. Latino speakers of Spanish. We help them also develop the ability to discern between colloquialisms and understand the heterogeneity of their identity and their community in that classroom. And the students hail from various parts of the Spanish-speaking world, including US-born Spanish speakers and any Spanish-speaking country you can think of, including Africa. So students represent these contact zones, namely the communities in which we live in the United States, where we have minority languages connecting with one another and coexisting with one another. And we also help to obviously encapsulate the whole experience to develop the professional and academic writing skills to later on be able to use the language professionally and also in their communities beyond the language that is just used at home. And ultimately, the main goal is to help deepen and strengthen and expand their intercultural competence while negotiating this duality of existence in a U.S. country where English is a dominant language. And finally, to articulate cultural and cultural perspectives and opinions in a way that is also understandable. Great, so in furthering our goals, essentially this experience has been really a way to weave in cultural artifacts and into the curriculum, is in effect to democratize the classroom by providing access to heritage language learners who are part of a minority language, but then also negotiate with the majority language. So it's really creating that ability to be a chameleon in a democracy in which we live in, where we're so different. And so this is nothing new with language learning, essentially. It's more of the same. But this Smithsonian Fellowship afforded me the opportunity to expand my repertoire of objects and cultural themes and cultural stimuli for students so that they can use these resources across disciplines, not just in my classroom, but rather as a trampoline to be more successful across classes that require literacy-based skills. And so we have some concrete activities that I want to share with you this afternoon in which we engaged to further and develop these goals. So we had a pre-visit activity where you'll see something here said by our most beloved Benjamin Franklin in the 18th century. And I'll give you a second to read over that. And so I asked the students in Spanish before we visit this class activity, who said this? I hide the Franklin part so that they don't know who said it. And then I asked them to tell me in their own words in Spanish, based upon an English language stimulus, to relay this information in their own words, and this helps develop their literacy skills and their communicative skills. And then also, are they in agreement with what Benjamin Franklin said about Germans over 300 years, almost 300 years ago, namely that Germans were going to Germanize us and make us all speak German and not be English speakers. And so they have to also defend their position, whether they're in agreement with Franklin or not. So it's really interesting to see various perspectives from students. So issues of whiteness come up because as you see here, Benjamin Franklin didn't consider Germans white, namely that they wouldn't acquire the same complexion that other English speakers in the colonies had. We talk about roots and identity. Again, Franklin operates off of the idea that your identity is a root, like a tree, that it's inextricably linked to who you are and will never change, as opposed to roots that it's very malleable and changeable. And so this is important for language speakers of Spanish in the US because they negotiate these two worlds very, very regularly on a regular basis. And so they engage in this discussion. At home, they're taught that their identity is a root with double O, and they come to realize that perhaps they might take on a new set of ideas, that their identity could be malleable and changeable and perhaps a little more flexible than they were told at home. We talk about integration of immigrants because Franklin said that Germans were great countrymen and great people to build nations, while he said that they wouldn't also be part of the cultural nation, which is also a contradiction in and of itself. Very interesting. And so we juxtapose this to today because today is very apt to talk about this diversity and this ideology of integrating new members of our cultural society. So we start today, in fact I mentioned this today, I showed him a picture of the woman on your left, married to Domenico Girardelli, the chocolatier from San Francisco, right? May not have thought, but she was married to this man and she followed him to San Francisco on a ship in the mid-1800s, right after California joined the Union. And she had 8 children with him, and she lived her Spanish-speaking existence in Oakland and didn't have to leave her language enclave. So I present this to the students because this exists in their context as well. And it's interesting, he was first in Uruguay, then he moved to Peru, and then he went to San Francisco, and later died in, I believe, in Italy, and then was repatriated back to South America. Very, very interesting story for this guy. We also talk about very consequential events in U.S. democracy development, namely the Boston Tea Party. And so students have to articulate in Spanish what it is this is. And so many of them have had exposure to the Boston Tea Party or colonial topics in their English history class in high school. But the point of bilingualism is to integrate those two worlds such that they can articulate in both directions at any point, and in a way that's also intelligible by everybody who speaks that language, whether it's standard or not. So this enables them to identify and interpret cultural themes in a way that again, levels the playing field so that they can integrate those two worlds into their minds. And so they get one creative presentational tasks. In language, when we talk about presentational tasks, basically giving students a stimuli and then having them present something. And so this one is, I asked the student, the museum has contracted you as an independent contractor to be as a curator and add some more things to this unit. What will you present? So this student said, well, I want to focus on the expulsion of Mexican-American U.S. citizens in the 1930s, and I'd like to have a plaque at this exhibition. That was really interesting, very, very bold, but also reflective of the students' interest in contributing to this democracy. And they also, again, have to articulate this in written and in spoken form, again, along with the tenets of the course. And so here's another one. At the very bottom left, you'll see a student said, well, I'd like to have some commemoration of gay liberation and the Stonewall riots. And so Marsha P. Johnson was a very pivotal figure in the Stonewall riots in the 1970s in New York. And so she wrote in Spanish completely this argument for including this into the exhibition at the Smithsonian. We also have some interpretational tasks where students have to think critically about some elements of civic freedoms, like voting rights, etc. And they also have to develop original conclusions about their perspectives regarding identity, namely their identity, their bilingualism and multiculturalism in a society that dominates with English use. And so we talk a little bit about these three dates, 1869, 1889, 1925. We talk about 1869, this painting that celebrates diversity, has everybody from different cultures welcomed at the Thanksgiving dinner table with I think it's Lincoln on the left and Grant on the right. I don't know who that middle person is, I can't quite discern. Washington, it's kind of hard to discern. But you'll see all the quintessential figures of our democracy welcoming everybody. You similarly see in 1889 this painting saying, well, we'd like to mix you all up in one identity or one monolithic Americanism or U.S. American way of being. And we have this unruly Irishman who doesn't want to be included, who doesn't want to be mixed up. And so we bring that up and I ask students, who in your family might be this unruly Irishman? And we comb through all this and we flesh those ideas out. Again, talking about language and identity as roots and roots. And then I juxtapose it with 1925 in August, where 20,000 people get together in Washington to celebrate Christian white supremacy. And so we juxtapose these things to confront students with the idea that what do you do in a democracy where we're all so different, radically different, and sometimes dangerously different, and how do we negotiate and coexist in such a world? We also talk about Frederick Douglass in the late 1800s and what he said about how we ought to build nations, and his idea of nationhood, a composite nation where, as before the law, we are all different, regardless of color of skin, origin, etc. And so students have to articulate this in Spanish. Again, integrating their knowledge in English and cross-pollinating that into the various languages that they use. I also show them a picture of Uncle Sam's clothing or costume, and they have to articulate in Spanish, who is Uncle Sam? Because that too is also a figurehead that is known by Spanish speakers in the US. They just can't articulate that in the language that they use at home. We also ask questions such as, are you in agreement with Douglass? Explain and defend your ideas, right? And so this student wrote, I'm in agreement with Douglass. Everybody deserves equality, and it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are. Number 3, this is Uncle Sam, and she talks about how he is a supporter of patriotism. And she had her facts straight. She said that this person came to be in the 1950s. We also have a student project, which is the culmination of the experience for students, where they have to integrate all these 3 skills: interpretation, presentation, and interpersonal activities and interpersonal relationship building in class. So the capstone project consists of students selecting and reading an article of cultural significance, either social or political, from a US-based Spanish language publication. You'll notice I underscored that. It's really, really important for students to realize that their center of gravity for the language, the Spanish language, doesn't have to be in the country of origin, but rather we have our own version of our source of the language in the US. And this is important because it builds pride in the students, and it helps them understand that they no longer have to be tied to those roots that they're told they have to be, but rather they can create their own roots in building their own repertoire and accessing their own primary sources or secondary journalistic sources. So students are tasked with informing, contextualizing, and furnishing their own opinions and perspectives based upon topics such as the US Census in 2020, as far as the question of, are you a US citizen? That was a big topic coming up. They were also asked to do things such as drug legalization, very controversial topics, gender roles, the roles of women, and religion. And so this is really significant for the students because they're used to only talking about family topics at home. They're not used to talking about consequential social issues such as immigration, religion, identity, real big topics. And so there's a huge challenge for students and they're asked then to write a summary of their project findings, lead a discussion, exchange ideas, and disagree with one another, and take issue with things, and defend their ideas. Much the same way you would do it in English class, or a history class, or any other class that deals with these topics. And so they're also asked to lead the class in a way that's creative. So they're asked also to take on some leadership in class, and also be teachers for their peers. And in that vein, students, it's really interesting because students at the end of those capstone projects weave in their Smithsonian experience into their project. Nothing I asked for, but they just did it very naturally. So that's really nice. It really was a pleasure to work with students whom I did not need to cajole to do things, or trick, or to weave things in a way that wasn't so apparent, but rather they took the initiative, and that was very, very satisfying for me. I have a short video that I want to share with you from Silvia Samayoa and Carolina Galeano. Carolina was from MCTV. They produced a video of our experience at the Smithsonian, so you can see a little bit of what we did.
La motivación por la cual hemos traído a los estudiantes a este Museo de Historia Nacional Estadounidense es precisamente porque la exhibición a la democracia se presta perfectamente a la discusión del bilingüismo que hemos tenido en MC y en esta clase para bilingües, y es una manera para que el estudiante participe de forma cívica, académica, y ver en carne propia pues artefactos culturales que han formado nuestra democracia.
Aprendí muchas cosas, por ejemplo, de que si una persona se propone hacer un cambio y el cambio que trata de proponer es bueno y beneficia a muchas personas, con sacrificio y mucho esfuerzo se logra hacer los cambios. Cuando estuvimos viendo el video de los 4 chicos que se sentaron a almorzar y que no les servían comida, ellos no se dieron por vencidos, ellos siguieron yendo al mismo restaurante hasta que se hizo algo muy popular en la ciudad y las demás personas lo apoyaron porque era por una buena causa. A través de la historia de Estados Unidos siempre hubieron divisiones y siempre han habido muchas personas queriendo quitar esas divisiones, y ahora a la mayoría de inmigrantes latinoamericanos los están considerando como segunda clase. Pero el poder adquisitivo de los latinos está incrementando y se está empezando.
Según el Pew Research Center, el número de votantes hispanos ha aumentado por 4 millones en los últimos 4 años.
El español para bilingües o para hablantes de herencia 106 es un curso diseñado para aquel estudiante que es de origen hispano o tiene alguna crianza con el idioma español y tiene el deseo de ampliar sus destrezas. Es decir, quiere mejorar su escritura, quiere ampliar su vocabulario, quiere crecer en el idioma en general y quiere profundizar su habilidad de mantener una conversación o mantener una interacción plenamente en español sin tener que cambiar entre el inglés y el español.
Según el censo del 2010, el 21% de los estadounidenses hablan otro idioma además del inglés. Para el 55% de los estadounidenses bilingües, el segundo idioma es español.
En esta clase, además, también está dirigida a aquel estudiante o aquella estudiante que esté interesada en explorar su propia cultura e identidad cultural y además llegar a algunas conclusiones propias en cuanto al valor de esa identidad cultural en un mundo donde el inglés domina.
Yo le recomiendo esta clase a otros, los que están interesados a tomar una clase de español. El profesor es muy amable, da mucha información, les ayuda con mucho gusto. Este visita sí, le da mucha información también. Les enseña qué pasó sobre la historia y lo que pueden cambiar.
Para Generación Latina, desde Washington, D.C., Silvia Samayoa.